My name is Meadow Fitton, and I coordinate the Water Talks program for California Trout. And could I just get a show of hands? Is there anyone in the audience who has never been to a Water Talks program? That's a nice few, so welcome and thank you. And thanks to the rest of you for your continued attendance to learning on these water-related topics. So we'll just go through a brief overview of the Water Talks program. It's an ongoing series of educational presentations on water-related topics. And so far we've held 27 programs since 2008. And here's a sampling of our topics that we've covered. And the topics are suggested by you, the community. This topic is a result of someone saying, hey, how about groundwater and policy and science? And here's some of the friendly faces. We've had 79 different people from our local and regional community now present information to share with the public. And I haven't found a funnier slide yet, so you have to submit one to me for why we're doing this. But we're hoping to provide a place to learn about water-related topics and put a little humor to one of the subjects that can tend to raise people's hackles. Again, friendly faces of some of our presenters. And really the purpose here, the goal, is for us to increase informed participation in water policy by providing this place for people to learn about water-related topics and interact with the experts. The format that we go from is running from 6 to 8 p.m. We do this short introduction. We walk through all of our presentations and then do our question and answer period. And then we'll close the evening and you'll have an opportunity, if you didn't have your question answered, to come and interact with the presenters. I forgot to do logistics. Because we run straight through the program, if you do need to use the restroom, they're at the very beginning when you came in the door. And the other thing was to find your noise-making device in your pocket and see if you can turn it on quiet. Cell phones, pagers. Does anyone use pagers anymore? If you could just take a moment and turn those off, that would be great. So tonight our program is titled New Groundwater Policy and Regional Science. And the main questions that we're hoping to answer tonight are: how does the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act apply to volcanic aquifers in this region? And then, what groundwater science would help scientists better understand the region's ground and spring water supply to help inform policymakers? And I just grabbed a screenshot of the website that is now for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act from the California Department of Water Resources. What we're hoping that you'll learn tonight is that you'll become familiar with the basic historical timeline of California's state groundwater policy so that you can know how it led to the current act. Be exposed to the main points of the Groundwater Sustainability Act, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and how it differs from the past policy. And we hope that you'll better understand the general volcanic hydrology in the Northern Cascade, California region and its complexity, and then to become aware of some of the gaps in the scientific understanding related to recharge areas, groundwater flow paths, storage, and residence time. So at the end, ask yourself, did we learn some of these things? So on tonight's presentation, we have Mary Randall, the Regional Coordinator from the Northern Region Office of Department of Water Resources, who will be covering the policy aspect of our presentation. And then we have Lee Davison, who's a California professional geologist and president of ML Davison and Associates, to talk about the region's hydrogeology. And then finally we have Ate Visser, who's a hydrogeologist from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, to talk about some new science, new tracers of recent recharge to predict drought impacts on groundwater. So after we hear all the presentations, we'll do our question and answer period. And without further ado, I will pull up Mary's presentation and introduce her. So Mary Randall, I should also just say that she probably didn't know she was putting herself on the spot for giving a presentation on groundwater when she said, oh, I think that Bill Eorn from our office will want to give a presentation on groundwater policy. And so I asked him, and then he sends his email to Mary and says, Mary, will you do this? So Mary is giving us the presentation. We're very grateful for that. She wears many hats at the Department of Water Resources Northern Region office, which is located in Red Bluff. As the regional coordinator, she works with internal and external partners to provide consistent messaging in an efficient and timely manner to foster collaboration. This work includes communication and outreach for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, something she's doing tonight. And as one of the 2 NRO tribal liaisons, she serves as the direct contact with the California tribes and works to improve tribal outreach and engagement. Mary's drought coordinator duties include attending local drought task force meetings within the NRO service area and providing outreach to stakeholders and local agencies experiencing drought impacts. She has worked for over 20 years at the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board and State Water Resources Control Board. She started her career as a consulting engineer in California and Texas. She earned a BA in mathematics from Carroll College in Helena, Montana, and a BS in civil engineering from Notre Dame, and an MS in civil engineering from UC Davis. And Mary enjoys spending time with her family, camping, quilting, and traveling. So let's welcome Mary to give us our update on policy.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Well, first I want to find out how familiar you are with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So I've got a few questions. Is this the first you've ever heard of it? If you can just raise your hand. Okay. Good portion of the audience. You have some limited knowledge. You're pretty familiar with it. You could give this presentation in your sleep. Okay, good. I'm about to the point where I think I can give it in my sleep. Okay, before I get started and tell you what I'm going to talk about, it's really important, and I'm sure you all realize that you can't just look at trying to get sustainable groundwater management without taking into the whole hydrologic cycle and surface water, people pumping, people discharging stuff. So it's really important that we look at this holistically. Okay, what I'm going to go over first is the acronyms. And for some of you guys in the back, I posted some of those on the railing over there. You won't be quizzed on these, but just in case you need a refresher as we're going through. I'm going to go over the background, then do an overview of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, talk about groundwater sustainability agencies and groundwater sustainability plans, then rural communities in the Act, give you a timeline, go over some Federal Reserve rights, then let's lightly touch on DWR's strategic plan, some regulations that we're developing, and then key messages. So this is probably going to go pretty fast. Okay, here we go. Acronyms. SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. GSA, that's Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and I'll explain all these things as we go along. A GSP is a Groundwater Sustainability Plan. BMPs, those are best management practices. And GMP, Groundwater Management Plan, which are the groundwater plans that were authorized by previous legislation. Okay, more acronyms. So, DWR, that's the Department of Water Resources, and B118 is Bulletin 118, which are reports that are updated periodically that discuss California's groundwater. And then CASGEM, that's the California Statewide Elevation Monitoring Program. And The top graphic is what the Bulletin 118 cover looks like. Then also the State Water Resources Control Board is involved in that. That's abbreviated SWRCB, also refer to them as the Water Board. And then just to really confuse you, we've got CWC, which is the California Water Code or the California Water Commission. So good luck on that. That's all of them. Okay, now for some definitions. Okay. In the Act, basin means a groundwater basin or subbasin as it's identified in Bulletin 118. So in Bulletin 118, a groundwater basin is defined as an alluvial aquifer or stacked series of alluvial aquifers with reasonably well-defined boundaries in a lateral direction and having a definable bottom. So alluvial aquifers are materials that are laid down by streams over time. The blue dashed line shows the lateral extent. Okay, and then groundwater subbasins from Bulletin 118 is created by dividing a groundwater basin into smaller units using geologic and hydrologic barriers or institutional barriers. So there's the lateral extent of the basin. Then that signifies what would be typical like a county line, so they may break it into subbasins by county lines, or they might use a hydrologic barrier like a river. Now, there's a lot of volcanic aquifers up in this area, and they are not, they're not alluvial basins, so they are not considered groundwater basins in Bulletin 118. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not important. They're considered groundwater source areas for the groundwater basins, but the Act does not apply to them. But we do realize how important they are. Okay, and so what is sustainable groundwater management? It's the management and use of groundwater in a manner that can be maintained during the planning and implementation horizon without causing undesirable results. So what are undesirable results? SGMA defines them, Sustainable Groundwater Act, as chronic lowering of groundwater levels, reduction of groundwater storage, seawater intrusion, degraded water quality, lapse of subsidence, or depletion of interconnected surface waters. Okay, so let's just step back for a moment, and here we're going to look at statewide water use. So looking for an average of 2005 through 2010, the total supply statewide was about 43 million acre feet per year. And of that, groundwater is supplied about 39%. Now for the Sacramento River hydrologic region, groundwater use is about 30% of the total supply, and that's at about 9,000 million acre feet or 9,000 acre feet. And as you can see in different areas, that the groundwater component for the whole water supply varies significantly. Okay, now this graphic has a lot of stuff on it, but this is leading to why this Sustainable Groundwater Act came to be. Okay, first of all, the orange and red dots signify change in groundwater levels from spring 2010 to spring 2014. So 2014 was the third year of the drought, sorry. So the yellowish-orange dots decreased 2.5 to 10 feet in groundwater elevation. The red ones, was a decrease of over 10 feet during that time. And then the black dots, those dots show that they're the lowest recorded groundwater level since groundwater levels were recorded at those locations. So as you can see, especially in the San Joaquin Valley, there's a significant number of those.
Do you have a pointer?
I might.
Go back to that one and just kind of give us where we are.
Okay, let's see. I don't see it.
Does anybody have a pointer in their pocket?
Can you sort of see the border of Siskiyou County line up there? It's pretty faint. Okay, and so that should give you some reference point from the Siskiyou County line up from there. That's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so what were some things that led up to the Groundwater Sustainability Act? I got a lot of notes for this page. So the recent legislation was built on a lot of previous steps to get to where we are today. And the first one was Assembly Bill 3030, which encouraged local agencies to prepare and adopt groundwater management plans. And then in 2002, Senate Bill 1938 expanded what was required in those plans. Then Bulletin 11803, that's the groundwater report that the state puts out, that's the most recent update that we have, and it included findings and recommendations for groundwater and groundwater management. In 2009, the CASGEM legislation was passed, and that mandated statewide groundwater elevation monitoring, because there's a lot of locations where we don't have information on what the groundwater elevation was before that, and there's still a lot of data missing. Then in 2011, Assembly Bill 359 was passed, and that required that these reports be submitted to the Department of Water Resources. Before that, they didn't have to submit them, so we weren't aware of what their plans were. We catch on eventually. And then in January 2014, the California Water Action Plan was issued, and it's a roadmap towards sustainable water management in general. And one of the actions includes sustainable groundwater management. So then in January 2014, the governor issued his first drought proclamation. That was followed in April 2014, and then just recently on April 1st, 2015, he issued another one. In September, the governor signed the package of groundwater legislation that we now call the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and we almost immediately at DWR, the Department of Water Resources, started working on that because we have a lot of deadlines that we have to meet. And some of these deadlines for local agencies, that if you are in a basin that is considered critically overdrafted, that you have to have your groundwater sustainability plan by 2020. And then by 2022, all the other high and medium priority basins have to have their plans adopted. So what is the Act? Okay, this is just a picture of the signing ceremony, and I think it's important to realize that the governor's statement when he signed that was, a central feature of these bills is the recognition that groundwater management in California is best accomplished locally. So there's three main parts to the Act. We've got the applicability and the definitions, then it defines local roles and the state roles. Okay, so this really goes over what's in the Act. It only applies to high and medium priority basins, and again, those are only alluvial basins. And it doesn't apply to adjudicated basins either. And each basin has to have a groundwater sustainability agency formed by June 30, 2017, and the groundwater sustainability plans have to be adopted by 2020 or 2022. And then if these actions aren't done, the state can step in, and that would be the State Water Board. But their actions are only meant to be interim, and the only reason they would step in is if the locals don't accomplish the milestones. SIGMA also defines a time frame to reach all these goals. So this is a map of the service area that we're in for the Northern Region Office, and you can see the various groundwater basins, and the way the high basins are in orange, the medium basins are in yellow, then there's low and very low. Okay, if you'll notice, within the Sacramento River hydrologic areas, so the southeastern part of Siskiyou County, there are no high or medium priority basins. So you're not subject to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Now there are some medium priority basins in Siskiyou County, And those are the Scott, the Shasta, Butte Valley, and Tule Lake. There is the McLeod Basin, but it's a very low priority basin. Okay. So, how can you be successful with the Sustainable Groundwater Act? If you form your groundwater sustainability agency by June 30, 2017, and you complete your groundwater sustainability plan, if you're a critically overdrafted basin, which none of the ones in Siskiyou County have been designated as that at this time, so you have to have that done by 2020. All other high and medium priority basins would be by January 31, 2022. And then you have a 20-year implementation period to make your groundwater basin sustainable. Oh, forgot the check marks. And these actions shield local regions from state intervention. So what is the Groundwater Sustainability Agency? It's one or more local agencies that implement the act. And a local agency is defined as a local public agency that has water supply, water management, or land use responsibilities within a groundwater basin. And the Act also supplied tools in order to accomplish this work. So it empowers the groundwater sustainability agencies to register groundwater wells, measure extractions, require reports, manage extractions, assess fees. And the groundwater sustainability plans are exempt from CEQA. The Act also establishes sustainability goal over time to guide management. Now this shows some of the challenges that some basins are going to have. The area outlined in black is a hypothetical basin. They've got 3 water districts within the basin. They don't cover the whole basin, and you've got 3 counties involved. So it's going to take a lot of coordination in order to develop the groundwater sustainability agencies and the plans. Now, to help people, the Water Education Foundation has published online this document and its approaches and options for new governance. And they say you need to identify your basins, identify work with local agencies, understand your basins and available resources, identify and involve key stakeholders in your area, evaluate the tasks and figure out who's going to do what, and evaluate and propose a governance model. So, right now, the Act also identified 15 exclusive local agencies as GSAs within their boundaries, but none of these are in Siskiyou County. So other medium and high priority basins, local agencies or combinations can get together and they can have a single groundwater sustainability agency with a single plan, or they can have multiple agencies, let's say multiple water districts are in that basin, and they can work together with one plan. Or you can have multiple groundwater sustainability agencies with multiple plans, and then they have to have a coordination agreement. A graphic sort of overlay that. So this is another way to do that, to show this. So the top one, you have one agency and one plan. So it covers the entire basin, assumes all authorities and responsibilities, and it can be a new or an existing agency. Or you can have multiple agencies and one plan, and so they work together with one centralized agency to come up with that plan. Or you can have the multiple GSAs, multiple plans, but they have to have a coordination agreement for the overall basin management. So what do you have to do as a groundwater sustainability agency? You have to publish notice of public hearing and hold those public hearings. And you have to consider all interests and beneficial uses and users of groundwater. And then you have to submit information, give a notice to DWR, what your boundaries are, and others in the basin, a copy of the resolution, any new bylaws and ordinances, and a list of interested parties and how their interests are to be considered to make sure that you involve local stakeholders. So here's the basic requirement for the plans. You need a description of the physical settings, identification of groundwater conditions, historic and projected water demands and supplies, maps, and measurable objectives with interim milestones. So every 5 years, at least you have to have milestones so that you can attain sustainability in 20 years. And then a description of how the plan is given consideration in the general plans, and that's why you need land use authority. So how does this impact rural communities? It applies to all non-adjudicated medium and high priority basins. So unlike CASGEM, if you're familiar with that, with the groundwater elevation monitoring, if you were considered a disadvantaged community, you got to get out of jail free card. You didn't have to do it. There's no waivers for this act. And you're going to have commit time and resources if you're going to participate. And if you don't participate, you're going to have other people making decisions for you, or at worst, you could have the State Water Board come in and make the decisions. And grants will be available starting next fiscal year for planning and projects. And my agency, the Department of Water Resources, will provide facilitation and technical assistance. So you could have picked up on the back, there's 11 by 17 fold-out sheet and legislation, because I don't expect you to be able to read this. But you can find this on any website, on the website. If you Google SGMA timeline, you'll find this. And it's color-coded, so the headers on the boxes, if they're blue, those are water board actions. If they're orange, those are DWR actions. If they're purple, they're joint actions between the water board and DWR. And if they're green, they're for local agencies. So there's enough jobs for everybody here. So the table that I had a little while back, so what you had to do to be successful. So this is, when does the state board step in? They can step in if any of these deadlines are missed. So if there's no Groundwater Sustainability Agency formed by June 2017, that's one date. If you have a critically overdrafted basin and there's no plan or it's considered inadequate, then they can step in after January 31, 2020. And then for all other medium and high priority basins, that deadline's in 2022. And then after January 31, 2025, if the groundwater sustainability plan is inadequate and there's significant depletions of interconnected surface waters, they can step in. In all triggering events, intervention is the result of a failure by locals to take action. So I'm not going to go through that whole chart, so I know you're all happy about that. But I'm going to go through the first 2 years, just so you have some idea what some of the immediate deadlines are. And here's the legend from the chart. So these are also color-coded to go with the legend. So locals cannot make changes to their existing groundwater management plans or adopt any new ones after January 1st, for medium and high priority basins only. And then DWR had to update the basin prioritization by January 1, and because the time frame was so short, they just used the CASGEM prioritization. And then that will be updated later. And DWR has to identify basins subject to critical conditions of overdraft this year. In 2016, DWR has to adopt regulations to revise basin boundaries, and that's by January 1, so we essentially have to do it this year. And locals have to submit final adjudicated basin judgments to DWR in 2016. DWR has to adopt groundwater sustainability plans by June. And by the end of the year, DWR has to publish a report for water available for groundwater replenishment. And then I just wanted to touch on Federal Reserve rights because I know there's a lot of tribes in this area. And federally recognized tribes may participate through a joint powers authority or other agreement with local agencies in the basin. Because they're not considered a local public agency, they cannot just assume the duties of the groundwater sustainability, the GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency. You gotta feel sorry for me after a while with those. Okay, participating tribes are eligible to conduct planning, financing, and management under the Act, including eligibility for grants and technical assistance, and exercise of regulatory authority, enforcement, or collection of fees needs to be pursuant to the tribe's authority and not per sigma. And federally reserved water rights to groundwater shall be respected in full. And there's a lot of interpretations as to what that exactly means. So we're almost done. So we have a draft strategic plan that's available on our website. These are the topics that it covers, and it's a pretty easy read, actually. And if you want to comment on it, those comments are due by June 1. And then we're in the process of developing regulations for basin boundary revisions, so the groundwater basin boundaries, and also for the groundwater sustainability plans and alternative documents. So what we do is we do internal scoping, then we draft the principles for the regulations, we draft emergency regulations, and then we present them to the California Water Commission for approval. And this shows the basin boundary emergency regulations timeline on top and the GSP timeline on the bottom. As you'll notice, we're right there on the first black box, basin boundary public listening sessions. We had one in Willows on Tuesday, and they had one in Central California Wednesday, and they had one today in Southern California. If you're really interested in basin boundary changes, which is typically water agencies, maybe counties might be, and probably the general public really isn't that knowledgeable on it. But if you're interested in that, there is a webinar tomorrow for people who couldn't make the 3 in-person presentations. And if you come to me afterwards, I can give you a flyer because you have to register for that webinar. So we're going to have the basin boundaries regs done by the end of the year, and the groundwater sustainability plan regulations are going to be following that. So here's the flyer I'll give you with that webinar. And then our key messages: groundwater is best managed locally. The state's role is to provide assistance to enable local and regional agencies to sustainably manage their resources. And strong and effective state agency alignment and coordination is required because we have to work very closely with State Board. And sustainable groundwater management can only be achieved in the context of regional and statewide water balancing, accounting for all sources and demands. And it's going to take decades to fully achieve sustainable water management, and a phased approach is necessary. So, when properly managed, groundwater resources will help protect communities, farms, and the environment against the impacts of prolonged dry periods and climate change. And there's some resources here, and Meadow's going to put this up on the website so you can just go there and find them. And if you're really interested in this, there's a website where you can sign up for the mailing list, and that's it.